Salt of the Earth Farm Stories is proudly brought to you by Grig Media. Step into the world of farmers from diverse backgrounds across Australia. Through intimate interviews, host Darren Grigg delves into farming practices, traditions, and the challenges farmers face in nurturing the land.
Bryan Ward, a true gentleman born in the 1930s. We hear about him riding his pony to school, managing Wamagama Station, mixing with royalties, and rehydrating his own country. Good afternoon, Bryan.
Good afternoon, Darren.
Bryan, where are we today?
Where are we?
Yeah, what's the name of your property and where
Illawong.
are
Illawong, which is Bonar Road, Tabletop 2640.
So we're just north of Albury.
Yeah, north of Albury, 28 k's, I think, to be exact.
And where were you born, Bryan?
I was born in Narracourt in South Australia. And my father had a farm right on the border in Langcoop and Narracourt. And as a little fella, I could never work out how we could leave home, get to Narracourt. Well, when we left home, we could still be in Narracourt before we left home because of the half-hour time difference. And I could never work that out. Hang on, we left home. We still haven't left home.
Right. So what sort of country was that and what were you farming?
Well, my father had it was an old soldier settlers block, and it was the old Ellerslie estate, which was quite a large area at the end of the Western District. And he was mainly sheep, a few cattle, but mainly sheep and a bit of cropping. And we went to school at the local Langcoop State School.
Right.
Until I was 10 or something. Then I went to Melbourne, to boarding school.
Yeah, okay. So can I ask then roughly what year you might have been born over at Narracourt?
1937.
Wow. A young looking Bryan for maybe a man who's in his 80s?
87, nearly 88.
Right. So what's your earliest memory of farming?
Oh, I think the 1944 drought, because nearly all the farmers around there after the war all had 3 or 4 ton Lend-Lease trucks, as they were called, Maple Leaf or Chev or Ford or something. And so everybody got one of those so they could feed their stock. And I remember the fellow's name, an orchardist, somebody Possingham. And my father used to go there and collect all the old fruit and stuff to feed the sheep. I can remember my mother with these old crash gearboxes. She said, "Let the check." I said, "Tip us all off the back."
Oh dear. So how long did that drought last for?
Oh, I can't remember.
So were there tractors and that on the land then?
Yeah. In Harris Farms, that old M thing, it was exactly the same as my father had. When I first walked in there, I thought, hell, my father used to have the same model.
Yeah, really?
Yeah.
Oh, at Harris Farms in Albury here?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah, that tractor in there.
What is that, a Massey or?
No,
International?
Farmall, which was international. And I can remember the two front wheels are very close together. I could always remember as a child sitting on my father's lap, with the headlands, always, they'd crab and push along and you'd have to try and straighten them off. I often wondered why they didn't have the wheels wider.
I know. Well, you'd enjoy looking in my dad's shed, actually. He's probably got about 6 in there.
Yeah.
All done up.
Yeah.
And what sort of machinery did you have on the farm when you were a kid?
Mainly draft horses and a trolley. We used to cart all the hay. And then we had Italian prisoners of war, for quite a long time. And they were great fellows. And I could never work out why they weren't locked up at night, being prisoners. And they used to sleep in the shearers' quarters. And that's the first spaghetti or macaroni and stuff we were ever introduced, past us.
They were no trouble?
No, which is interesting, but they were good cooks and great blokes. We had the first 2, one was a boot maker, which was quite handy in those days, mending things and making things. The other fellow was just an ordinary bloke, Tony. And then we had 2 Northern Italians. And when they came, they used to swap them around a bit. When they came, they walked into the shearer's quarter and they said, "Oh, Calabrian, very bad, very bad." I remember mother and father had a little dictionary so they could communicate.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah. And then carting the hay and things, they were loading up the trolley and a couple of draft horses pulling it, and the rabbits were incredible. You know, as children, when going down to the creek, you could jump on the banks and they all shake.
Really?
And I can remember, I think it was about 3 miles or something along the Mosquito Creek. My father used to put rabbit trails out, and they used to feed them on carrots and apples, anything they could, and then poison with strychnine.
Yeah.
And with strychnine, they only go about a metre at the most off the track. And I think at one stage, somebody said in one of the halls was 12,000 in that row, 12,000 rabbits. Wow. Then, of course, the poor Italians had to dig these huge pits to bury them all.
Yeah. God, they would have been wrecking the country.
Yeah. Oh, they did.
Yeah. And how many Clydesdales did you have on the farm?
Oh, about four or five. I remember as a child trying to put the collar on them. You know, I had to get a drum to stand on to get the collar over.
Then I guess when you were a teenager in your 20s, that would have changed, that you would have lost the Clydesdales.
Well, we left there in 1952. My father sold that and moved down to the Mornington Peninsula. He had 700 acres just out of Flinders. Beautiful. Yeah.
So how far away was school from your home?
Well, the state school wasn't very far away. We could ride ponies there, but when I went to Melbourne and then down to Flinders, 50 k's or something, but I was a boarder at school.
Right.
Yeah.
But the state school, you rode your horse there and tied
pony. We used to have a lot of fun because they had a horse paddock for all the kids and with their horses and things. And the teacher used to billet the teacher around different houses all the time. And when you were a bit older, you were allowed to, or you had to, harness up the horse for the teacher. So you put the shafts through the fence and put the horse on the other side, and buggy on one side of the horse. And of course you'd all scatter off. And the poor old teacher had no clues.
Bryan. And when you left school, you went to boarding school, then you went back to Flinders to...
No, well, I was in Melbourne working for a while at Newmarket and the wool stores for a while. And while I was there, after I left school, I was very keen on rowing, and I rowed in the 8 at school for 2 years, and then a fellow from the university boat shed, he ended up by getting a bronze medal in the Olympics in '56. He walked past the shed one night, our boat shed, and said, what are you doing next year? And I said, I'm working in Melbourne. And he said, well, why don't you come and row with us? And I said, well, I'm not going to university. He said, that doesn't matter, you can row during the summer. So in 1956, all of a sudden you left school and you're in the Olympic trials.
Were you really?
And in a Cox 4, and we got beaten by that much in the final. The other ones went on to the Olympics. And then the next year, I was extremely lucky because the first year I only rowed in a 4 with them at university. And then I got into their 8 and then into the King's Cup.
Did you?
Yeah. And we won in 1957.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So you were only a foot away from
from being in the Olympics. But we really didn't appreciate it because the Olympics are always in the Northern Hemisphere. And then all of a sudden they were here and it all happened.
Fascinating.
And then I went home after the King's Cup. I went home and I went home and then I went to New Zealand because I wanted to go to Lincoln, and you're meant to, be in the country for at least 6 or 7 months to get an idea what's going on.
That's a university, or?
Well, it is now, but it was just like an ag college in those days.
In South Island or North?
South Island, and Massey was the North Island. Lincoln, the South Island.
And why did you think of going to New Zealand to study?
Well, my father was heavily involved in the Corriedale world, and he had quite a few mates there. And they said, send him across and they can work here for a while. And I said, well, righto. So I went across there in '59 and worked over there, and I was going to go to Lincoln, and then my father wanted to be home. And I went home, and in the meantime, I was pretty keen on a girl over there, and she went to England for 12 months. And she came back via Australia. Anyhow, it was one of my bosses, and if I married one of the boss's daughters.
Really?
Yeah. So anyhow, that was all great. And then I could see that wasn't going to work at home. So a fellow came to me, he said, I hear you're looking for a job. And I said, yeah, I'd love one. And I knew him, and he knew my father very well. And he said, I can get you an interview if you wish. I said, oh, that'd be great. So I trotted up to Melbourne one night and saw Gordon Darling, who just bought Margama, had an interview with him one night, and then he rang me next day and he said, I'd like you to come and have a look at the property. I didn't know where Margama was, no idea. Anyhow, we trotted up the highway, found the place and had a look around, and he showed me just quickly around, went home. That was on Saturday. We drove up on the Saturday, we saw it on the Sunday, and then he said, I want you to ring me on Tuesday and let me know what you think. And there was an old boy in Flinders he said, what happened? And I said, such and such. And he said, well, all you've got to say is, you want the job and it's yours. I said, no, you don't. Anyhow, I rang Gordon Darling on the way back from Newmarket, taking some lambs up, and I rang him up, and he said, what did you think? And I said, I want the job. And he said, it's yours.
There you go.
Yeah.
So who owned it then?
Well, Gordon Darling bought it. Used to belong to the Fairburns, or Margama Station. Yeah, it was 70,000 acres originally, and they got split up. And the Fairburns, old Sir George Fairburn, bought it in 1920 or something, and he split it up, gave me 3 grandchildren, nearly 4,000 acres, all each on the western side of the Hume Highway, and his son Clive Prill 15,000 on the eastern side of the highway. And then it'd been run as the last 5 been subdivided, soldier settlement, closer settlement, down to the last 5,000 acres, which was run as an estate. And they split that 5,000 acres into 3 blocks. The 2,000 acres with the homestead on it, another 1,200 acres, which was bare land, and another 1,300 acres, which was bare land too. And Gordon Darling bought the homestead block, 2,000 acres, and that's where I went there. And, being run as an estate for so long, it was right from the dirt up. It was really run down, and only 3 paddocks.
Really? Over 1,200 acres?
2,000.
2,000 acres. So how old were you then when you first came to Margama?
28.
Wow, that's a big job for a young fella. So how long were you at Margama for?
29 years.
And what was your main objectives at Margama? What was your main goals to achieve?
Well, to get it running. And Gordon Darling was a brilliant businessman, and I was the practical fella, so the place really hummed to get it going. At one stage I had 4 jackaroos, and then we built it up to, when I left, 6,000 acres, closer settlement blocks,
Right.
which all used to belong to Margama.
Yeah, running wool sheep.
Running corridors to start with, and then merinos, and then during the wool collapse, we were all cattle, 1,000 breeders then.
What were they, Angus or Herefords?
Hereford.
Yeah.
Poland.
So did you love Margama?
Oh, it was great. Great. Of course, we were, John and I were there as the host and hostess of when the Royals were there.
Well, I'm going to ask you about that in a moment, but did you have kids when you were at Margama?
Yeah, one little fella, Tim, the eldest, who's now 60.
And you've got grandkids?
8.
Wow. Yes, I believe you had some very special visitors come to see you at Margama. Can you tell me about that?
Well, we got notification most probably about a week or more before they were coming. It was all hush-hush, and the federal police came down and checked everything out and did all these things, and then finally the word got out that the Royals were going to stay there. So all hell broke loose, the phone calls and people coming up the drive, and Diana in the end went up and parked a car right across the ramp so they couldn't come in, and then they took to the air. And they'd circle around and do all these things. So then they locked down the airspace. It was quite a big area all round Albury. There was a couple of smart fellas apparently came in and filmed and did all those things. So they were directed into Albury, cameras, films confiscated, and most probably got a hefty fine. Anyhow, they were there for, 16 days or more.
Were they really?
Might have been more.
Who came?
Prince Charles and Princess Diana and little William.
William was alive. So what year was this?
83, during the drought.
And so you got to meet them?
Oh, yes. When they first arrived, they met them in the Womargama foyer, but prior to that, that's when the drought broke that day. In the meantime, feeding cattle and everything, with feed bins and things, the driver had done about 1,000 circles around this area to go through a gate, and of course the wet soil separated from the other, and the whole bloody thing went into the creek. Tractor and everything. He jumped out, thank goodness, and then about 3 hours before they came, no mobile phones, and I got the message. I had to roar back, and I got hold of Pickles' crane in there, and I said, look, you better get your arse into gear because I'm in strife. I've got a feed bin and tractor. They're about to come. We've got to clear the road because the property was separated by a tunnel road. So you had 2,500 or 3,000 on one side and 2 on the other. So anyhow, we got all that fixed up, and then we met him in the foyer. And Prince Charles was absolutely, well, they were both had their coats and things on, but Prince Charles walked in there and he was dripping wet, and he said, this is the first time I've had to wear a Macintosh in Australia.
What's a Macintosh?
Well, a coat, overcoat. Yeah. Well, waterproof coat.
Yeah.
The English, like what do they call gumboots, something? Wellingtons.
Wellingtons.
Yeah.
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 So you got to take them around the farm?
No, unfortunately. I used to see him walking around the paddock with Princess Diana. We'd have a chat. And then sometimes I'd go past and he said, well, you show us. And I said, yeah, I will. So you'd ring up, and of course the bodyguards would, fob you off and things. And then you'd say, oh, you didn't take me around. And I said, look, I can't get through to you. And he said, oh, such and such. He was pretty disappointed with all that.
They were good to talk to?
Oh, yeah, so easy. But little William was there. Well, I didn't keep a diary on it at all. Dinah would have remembered all those things, but I think he was there at least, certainly 3 days before they arrived back from Darwin.
Yeah. With
the nanny and the homestead. They used to drive around the square with a little fella in the back, and you'd stop and he'd smile at you. Great age. He was only nearly one, I think.
What a great experience to have.
Yeah, it was, well, I suppose in one way, pretty daunting having 2 future kings under the one roof, and now one's king and the other one's got 3 children.
That's right. That's right. I suppose it was interesting to look at their entourage, and perhaps they had their own cooks and that, did they? Yeah. We had, in the Jackaroos quarters, we had basically the household staff, which must have been 8 or 9 or something, the cook. The nannies was in the homestead with Prince William. Special branch, the New South Wales Police, they were in Albury, well, they stayed in Albury, but security was really tight, shoot to kill. Mm. And they whenever they were away, there was an old tree in Oaky Bulga, and the pistol practice, dead eye, boom, boom. And they told them, we'll shoot to kill. Gee.
Then I had a wireless beside my bed, and crackled one night about midnight or something, and there was an intruder. And I said, where? Anyhow, I trundled along on the motorbike, and they said, you're getting near it? I thought, hey, hang on. Anyhow, it was the moonlight shining on a broken old beer bottle.
Oh, was it really?
And then we had a blackout one night, and they said, sabotage. Oh. And we had our own alternator thing, so we fired up those and got them going. So my real contribution was the ancillary services. Gates worked and the dunny worked and all those sort of things. Well, the Seppi did get blocked at one stage. That was a bit of a drama, but never mind.
Yeah.
We got all through that.
So you've made some big environmental changes at Womargama too, is that right?
Oh, yes. A lot of tree planting, water scheme. We put in a huge water scheme over the years.
Did you go back to farming sheep then after the drought?
Yes, merinos.
Back to merinos. Yeah. And are they still running merinos out there now? Yes,
they are. When I left, I had a really good Suffolk stud, 200 head, and it was one of the biggest and the best in Australia. It really was a very successful little stud. And then we had the whole sheep with the merinos, etc. We had 14,000 sheep and just about 890 breeders. which at that stage still Hereford. Oh no, they were beef makers. I changed over to beef maker.
Yeah. So how did the country look when you left?
Great. Yeah, it all recovered and was looking well, but
Yeah. So that was in the 90s you would have left Womargama?
I came here. Oh, I built the house in 94, so I must have been in 93.
So you grew up a family there?
Yeah, all the boys. Yeah, 3 boys all grew there. Well, Reagan was there too.
Really?
Yeah.
What year was that?
Oh, don't ask me. I can't remember. It was after the Royals.
Wow. God, who else have you got up your sleeve to tell me?
Oh, he was a great fella.
But it attracted a lot of interest nationally, didn't it, Womargama Station?
I don't know how much it was before when the Fairburns had it. I know it was always known as Womargama Station, but they had a very good shorthorn stud there when we went there. Or it was gone. Well, they had a dispersal of it before the property was sold, but I'm not certain how special it was then.
In the 90s at some point, you found some land here in a tabletop?
Yeah, it was just by chance. I'd been looking for a long time, and one of the agents said, "Oh, I've got a place," and he showed me a couple of places which were disastrous. And anyhow, then he showed me this, and as I say, I looked in through the gate, and I thought, "Oh, this is I've done all this." But after we'd gone round, I had another look when I closed the gates, and I thought, "Hang on, I reckon I could do something with this." And I went home, and Dana said, "What do you think?" And I said, "I reckon it's a goer." And she said, "Well, take me." So I took her up to the 2 gates we could. She overlooked it, and she said, "This is great." So away we went.
Wow. What did it look like then?
Oh, terrible. As I say, it was just rabbits, thistles, and only 2 paddocks, and it was eaten right out.
And water points? Were there water points
No,
there?
2 dams, which are only little ponds. And that was all, and one old subdivisional fence which had fallen over, and the boundary fence, that was all that was there.
And how many acres is on this place?
160 hectares. And I got 30% of that now back into vegetation again.
And when you first came here, you were sheep farming?
Yes.
And that was for wool or meat?
Wool,
Were you shearing here too?
using the neighbour's wool shed. That was we're getting up to 3,000 cents, which was fantastic. And then all of a sudden, 1,000 cents, losing money backwards.
Right. And then you changed to cattle?
Yeah.
So how old were your boys when you moved here?
They'd already living elsewhere,
Right.
on their own. And then my youngest, Chris, he was here for a little while. And the other 2 had their own, lived together.
And you built a road up into the top of a hill here for a house. And how did all that happen?
Well, I've always been very keen on landscaping. And it just seemed to be natural to me when I see a place, what you can do, what you can't do. So I was extremely lucky that I had a blank canvas. So I could do what I wanted to do, and I reckon this was the right place for a house. You could have gone further up, but then you carve into the side of the hill. It doesn't look comfortable, as this just seemed to be the natural place. And then, following the ridge up just seemed to be the right way to do it. And then fencing it, I did all the fencing myself, drove every post in, augured every post down, and did all that. And then it was, and I did a lot of direct seeding as well to keep my head above water. But no, it was all very rewarding.
Yeah. I want to talk about the broader farm shortly, but the house, how did you build that and how did you come across the materials?
Well, number one was purely by when we built the road and sitting on a roller. I loved the colour, and I thought, well, I'd like to build a house out of it. So we had to find out how. Found out a fella coming back from West Australia, and he said, "Oh, I'll give it a go." And I said, "Righto." So I had an old master builder who did a lot of work for me from Womargama. He and his son poured the slab, and when he carted all when he got the material from our old friend Max Schultz from his little pit, I was worried about all these big stones. So there was a plant further down near Gerodgery, which were crushing rock. So we sent, I think, 20 loads, tractor and trailer loads of stone down there, and then it came back with, I think, 12 crushed stuff, sort of 40 mil. So then away we went.
And so how'd you do that? It's rammed earth.
Yeah.
But that was a machine to pack the earth in?
Yeah, a compressor. And of course, water, we only had a well down there we had to pump up and all those things. So it's pretty basic.
So the thickness of these walls would be?
300 the outside and 200 the internal.
And how do the thermals work then?
Oh, fantastic.
Keeps it cool in the summer and warm in the winter?
And also I had to, for wheelchair access, sooner or later we had to design it. So Dana said, since you came in the front door, you look at the kitchen. I said, no, we'll put an island there. So, you virtually got 5 rooms in one.
Mm. And so Dana had MS, is that right?
Yeah.
And she was in a wheelchair?
No, not then. She was still ambient, but just.
Right. Yeah, and you looked after her then?
Yeah.
Wow. So none of the boys have decided to come home on the farm?
Well, Tim's right next door, my eldest, because when the fella who sold me this, he said, do you want to buy the other half? And I said, Dana and I didn't want it. So I said, the boys might be interested. So the 3 boys bought that. And then 2 of them got married. And so Tim, the eldest, kept it. And then he's just built a house there and he's got 3 young children, 13 down to 10, 3 little girls. So I'm just hoping, because I don't want to leave here, that 1, 2 or 3 of them will lease the place.
Yeah, good.
So that's the way I want it, because I couldn't lease it to anybody. And it's too valuable. They realise it's their inheritance, too valuable to sell.
Yeah. Bryan, what's your favourite tool or piece of machinery on the farm?
I only got one, and that's a bobcat.
You got one? Fantastic. Yeah.
But far more useful than a tractor or anything.
Yeah.
I can stack all the timber up and do things, grade the drive.
Perfect. Bryan, I've got some fun questions now. They're called off-the-wall questions. What does your daily routine look like?
Walk outside the door, shout out the orders, and then carry them out.
Oh, what do you see when you look out the door every morning?
I just see beauty, satisfaction, tranquil, excitement, everything.
Absolutely. Does farming impact your lifestyle or family life?
I don't think so.
And what's something our listeners might not know about you?
I wouldn't have a clue.
What's your biggest failure and did you learn from that experience?
I really can't think of any real failures.
And if you could be remembered for one thing, what would it be, Bryan?
Again, a Biden.
Well, I think you're doing something quite amazing to this property and you'll be remembered for that.
Well, I hope so.
Well, I've got to ask, what has been your most favourite job?
What I'm doing now.
Living the dream.
Yep.
If you could give your 18-year-old self some advice, what would you say?
Keep a clear head. I had an old rowing coach when I was at school. Always, when you're rowing, keep a clear head. And every now and again things get all jumbled up. And I come back to that, keep a clear head. And it all goes away and it comes back to, you can think again. Away you go. Keep a clear head.
Nicely said. I'll remember that. Tell me about 1, 2 or 3 most influential people in your life.
Well, he was one, my old rowing coach, Roger Day, at school. And I think most probably Gordon Darley, my boss, because he was a top businessman and, a BHP board and all those things. And, his knowledge and experience and what he imparted onto me from, the farming wise, finance, all those things, I thought were pretty unique to get all that. And all these business people who came up to him, I was chatting to them.
Is there something in your career you didn't expect?
Oh, they probably died of not getting MS.
Yeah.
It was a pretty hard pill to swallow. Well, for her especially, but for me too. That really sort of shatters your whole life.
Yeah. How many years ago was it she passed?
Nearly 11 years, because we were married just short of 51 years. It was just such a wonderful, happy marriage life. I'd never try and repeat it.
Beautiful, Bryan. Tell me, what time of the day do you get your best work done?
I can't really answer that because you're out of bed early and you go to bed late. But There's no particular hour.
If you could have a coffee or a cold drink with anyone, who would that be?
Or your family.
Yeah, well said. And if you could live anywhere in the world, where would that be?
Here or New Zealand.
Nice. Whereabouts in New Zealand?
Or the South Island.
I love it too. Well, I think here is really special, Bryan, and what you're doing is quite amazing. If we can wrap this episode up, I want to come back and talk to you about the broader farm and what you've done and how you've developed and softened the country here at Tabletop and rehydrated it. So thanks very much for your time today, Bryan, and we'll talk to you again in a couple of weeks.
Hello, thank you.
I really enjoyed my afternoon with this gentleman. Stay tuned for another episode with Bryan talking about rehydrating country, his own way, published in a couple of weeks.
Salt of the Earth Farm Stories is proudly brought to you by Grig Media.